James Joyce. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a razor and a mirror lay crossed. And one of the best-known and controversial novels in the English language begins. Ulysses, by James Joyce. James Joyce was born in 1882 in a colonial British Ireland that was seeking independence. He was brought up in Catholic schools but turned away from religion in his teens. He studied foreign languages and literature at Dublin University and experimented with writing, publishing articles and poems in magazines. On June 16, 1904, he met his future wife. June 16th, a date to keep in mind. James Joyce's portrayal of Ireland's complexities, from its cultural tensions to its political struggles, is integral to understanding the depth and nuances of his literary masterpieces, even though he wrote most of his works in exile. His distance from Ireland allowed him to write about his homeland with a unique blend of intimacy and objectivity. Joyce's works, especially Dubliners and A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, are deeply embedded in the social, cultural, and political fabric of Ireland at the turn of the 20th century. They capture the nuances of Irish life, the struggles for national identity, and the impacts of colonialism. In works like Ulysses, Dublin is not just a setting, but a character in its own right. His first novel, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, was initially rejected. In the largely autobiographical work published in 1916, he recounts his childhood and youth in Dublin, his education by the Jesuits, his rebellion against religious and social norms, and his liberation through his artistic vocation. By observing the real lives of ordinary Dubliners through the prism of his alter ego Stephen Dedalus, the famous writer sketches out the universal human condition. After World War I, Joyce returned for a few months to Trieste, and then, at the invitation of Ezra Pound, in July 1920, he went to Paris. His novel Ulysses was published there on February 2, 1922, by Sylvia Beach, a proprietor of the bookshop Shakespeare and Company. James Joyce finished writing Ulysses near the end of 1921, but had difficulties getting it published. The Little Review began a serial publication in March 1918, but in January and May 1919, 2 installments were suppressed as obscene and potentially subversive. The novel was banned for obscenity in the United Kingdom in 1922, where it was blacklisted until 1936. Ulysses is constructed as a modern parallel to Homer's Odyssey. All of the action of the novel takes place in Dublin on a single day, June 16, 1904. Remember? I told you June 16th was a date to remember. The 3 central characters, Stephen Dedalus, the hero of Joyce's earlier A Portrait of the Artist, Léopold Bloom, and his wife Molly Bloom, are intended to be modern counterparts of Telemachus, Ulysses, and Penelope, respectively. Many of the novel's characters are also based on real-life friends, family members, and acquaintances of Joyce. The character of Bloom is somewhat based on Italo Svevo, who was Joyce's scholar and friend. By the use of interior monologue, Joyce reveals the innermost thoughts and feelings of these characters as they live hour by hour, passing from a public bath to a funeral, library, maternity hospital, and brothel. Joyce's major innovation was to carry the interior monologue one step further by rendering, for the first time in literature, The myriad flow of impressions, half-thoughts, associations, lapses and hesitations, incidental worries, and sudden impulses that form part of the individual's conscious awareness, along with the trend of rational thoughts. This stream of consciousness technique proved widely influential in much 20th century fiction. Critical opinion remains divided over Joyce's last work, Finnegan's Wake, a universal dream about an Irish family, composed in a multilingual style on many levels and aiming at a multiplicity of meanings. But, although seemingly unintelligible at first reading, the book is full of poetry and wit, containing passages of great beauty. Since 1954, when a small group of James Joyce admirers decided to dress up in period costumes and walk around Dublin reciting excerpts from his work, June 16th, you see, has become an annual event in the Irish capital. Guided tours of the streets of Dublin are organized, and a bus travels back and forth between the most emblematic places in the book to allow fans to immerse themselves in the very special world of James Joyce. The James Joyce Tower and Museum in Sandy Cove, 30 minutes from Dublin, is open all year round. Housed in a former military tower built by the British during the Napoleonic Wars, the museum traces Joyce's life, recalling that the writer lived for several months within the walls of this building.